At the edge of the Persian plateau, the wind moves slowly across dry mountains and endless desert plains. For centuries, this land has watched empires rise and fall. But in the winter of 1979, something far greater begins to shake the foundations of the Middle East. In the crowded streets of Tehran, millions of voices rise together in anger and hope. Smoke drifts above rooftops as protesters fill wide boulevards once dominated by royal power. The rule of the Shah, a monarch who had governed Iran with the backing of the West, begins to crumble beneath the weight of revolution. Inside the glittering halls of the royal palace, the old order fades quietly. Crystal chandeliers still shine above polished marble floors, yet outside the gates the world is changing faster than anyone inside can control. Within weeks the monarchy collapses, and Iran enters a new and uncertain age. From exile, a frail but determined cleric returns to a country transformed by rebellion. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini steps onto Iranian soil and is welcomed by crowds that stretch beyond the horizon. His voice carries a promise of justice, faith, and independence from foreign influence. Soon, the revolution reshapes every corner of the nation. Religious leaders take control of the government, replacing the Western-aligned monarchy with a new Islamic republic. Portraits of the Shah vanish from walls and government offices. In their place appear images of Khomeini, stern and watchful. Yet the victory of the revolution brings not calm, but turbulence. Factories slow, ministries argue, and the powerful army that once protected the Shah is shaken by purges and suspicion. Officers are arrested or dismissed, accused of loyalty to the fallen monarchy. Across the country, uncertainty spreads like dust across desert wind. Some Iranians celebrate the promise of a new future guided by faith. Others fear the rising power of radical forces within the revolution. The once mighty state now struggles to hold its balance. Far to the west, beyond rivers and marshlands, another leader watches these events with careful attention. In Baghdad, the capital of Iraq, Saddam Hussein sits at the center of a rising dictatorship. He is only in his early 40s, yet already he rules with an iron will. Portraits of his face hang across the country, and his authority reaches into every ministry, every military unit, and every city street. Only a year earlier, he forced his predecessor aside and claimed absolute power. Iraq itself is a complex land of different peoples and loyalties. Most of its citizens belong to the Shia branch of Islam, yet the government is controlled by a Sunni minority loyal to Saddam and his Ba'ath party. In the mountains of the north live Kurdish communities that dream of independence. To maintain control, Saddam governs through fear and discipline. Political rivals disappear in midnight arrests, and military commanders understand that loyalty matters more than skill. The state becomes a machine built to serve one man and his ambitions. As the revolution in Iran unfolds, Saddam senses both danger and opportunity. The new government in Tehran openly calls for Islamic movements to rise across the region. In Iraq, where the Shia majority has long lived under Sunni rule, those words carry the spark of possible rebellion. Bombings begin to shake Iraqi cities. Government officials blame extremist groups linked to Iran. The atmosphere between the two neighbors darkens quickly as accusations and threats echo across the border. The rivalry between Iraq and Iran is older than the modern states themselves. For centuries, Persian and Arab empires struggled over the lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Even in the 20th century, the border remains a fragile line shaped by politics and suspicion. At the heart of the dispute lies a narrow but vital waterway where the two great rivers meet the sea. Known in Arabic as the Shat al-Arab and in Persian as the Arvand Rud, this river carries the lifeblood of both nations. Oil tankers and cargo ships travel its waters on their way to the Persian Gulf. Only a few years earlier, both governments had signed an agreement to share control of the river. Yet the fragile peace never erased the deeper rivalry beneath it. Now, in the chaos following the Iranian Revolution, Saddam believes the balance of power has suddenly shifted. Iran is larger and more populous than Iraq, but its military has been shaken by political purges. Experienced officers have been imprisoned or executed, and the once powerful army struggles with confusion and mistrust. In quiet meetings inside government buildings in Baghdad, Iraqi officials discuss the moment before them. Intelligence reports suggest that Iran is divided and vulnerable. Kurdish rebellions have erupted in its border regions. Its economy is faltering. To Saddam, the situation appears like a door briefly left open. He imagines himself not only as the leader of Iraq, but as the champion of the Arab world. If he can strike quickly and weaken Iran, he believes he can reshape the balance of power across the Middle East. There is also the promise of oil. Just across the border lies the Iranian province of Khuzestan, a region rich with some of the largest oil fields on Earth. Its rivers, refineries, and ports form the heart of Iran's petroleum industry. Some of its population speaks Arabic, which Iraqi leaders hope might welcome their forces. Inside military headquarters, maps are spread across long tables, red lines mark the border, while arrows point toward Iranian cities and strategic roads. Commanders study the plans under dim lights, imagining a campaign that could be completed in weeks. The Iraqi army appears strong. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers stand ready, supported by tanks, artillery, and modern aircraft purchased from the Soviet Union in Europe. On paper, it looks like a force capable of swift victory. Across the frontier, Iran still possesses powerful equipment left from the days of the Shah. American-made fighter jets rest on airfields, and armored divisions guard important cities. Yet the revolution has left the armed forces uncertain and divided. To Saddam, it seems like the perfect moment to strike before Iran regains its strength. Throughout 1980, tensions grow steadily worse. Border guards exchange gunfire across dusty checkpoints. Fighter jets circle near the frontier while diplomats trade angry accusations. At the same time, both governments quietly support rebellions inside the other's territory. Iran aids Kurdish fighters in northern Iraq, while Iraq backs Arab militants in Iran's Khuzestan region. Each small clash adds another spark to a gathering storm. By late summer, the air along the border carries the feeling of approaching war. Iraqi armored divisions gather in hidden positions behind the frontier. Supply trucks rumbled through the night, carrying fuel and ammunition. Young soldiers clean their rifles beneath the desert stars, unaware that many of them will soon enter one of the longest and bloodiest wars of the 20th century. In Baghdad, Saddam Hussein makes his decision. He believes Iran is weak, divided, and unable to resist a swift blow. A quick invasion could secure valuable territory, strengthen his leadership of the Arab world, and remove the revolutionary threat next door. But history rarely follows the plans drawn on maps. Within weeks, the quiet borderlands between Iraq and Iran will erupt into fire. What begins as a gamble for quick victory will soon become a war that devours an entire generation. The storm is gathering, and neither side yet understands how long it will rage. If you value stories that go beyond headlines and reveal the forces shaping nations, you are in the right place. At Polity Pictures, we explore the power, strategy, and history that define our world. Subscribe and stay with us as we uncover the stories that governments rarely explain and textbooks rarely simplify, because understanding power is the first step to understanding the future. Dawn breaks over the desert on September 22nd, 1980. A pale orange light spreads across airfields and military bases as pilots climb into their aircraft. Engines roar to life, and within minutes, dozens of Iraqi jets rise into the morning sky. They streak eastward across the border, carrying bombs meant to cripple Iran before it can react. Runways, hangars, and radar stations are the targets. Iraqi leaders hope the sudden strike will destroy the Iranian Air Force on the ground and clear the path for a swift victory. Explosions ripple across Iranian airfields as the first bombs fall. Black smoke climbs into the sky while sirens echo across the bases. Yet many aircraft survive the attack, hidden in reinforced shelters or already airborne. Within hours, Iranian fighter jets begin to answer the assault. Sleek aircraft sweep across the border in retaliation, striking Iraqi positions and sending a clear message that the war will not be decided in a single morning. Along hundreds of miles of frontiers, Iraqi armored columns begin to move. Tanks grind forward across dry plains, while artillery trucks follow close behind. Dust rises in thick clouds as soldiers cross into Iranian territory. The invasion spreads across several directions at once. In the rugged mountains of the north, Iraqi forces push into Kurdish regions where the terrain twists into narrow valleys. To the south, the main attack drives toward the oil-rich province of Khuzestan. Here, the land flattens into a network of rivers, marshes, and canals. Palm trees line muddy banks while refineries and ports sit beside the water, forming the heart of Iran's oil industry. Two cities become immediate targets. Khorramshahr stands beside the Shatt al-Arab waterway, its docks crowded with cargo ships and warehouses. Not far away lies Abadan, home to one of the largest oil refineries in the world. Whoever controls these cities controls a vital artery of wealth and power. Iraqi commanders expect local Arabs in the region to welcome their arrival. Instead, they meet fierce resistance. Iranian soldiers dig into defensive positions among the streets and industrial buildings. Volunteers arrive carrying rifles, determined to defend their homeland despite the chaos left by the revolution. Fighting erupts block by block in Khorramshahr. The thunder of artillery shakes the ground while shattered buildings fill the air with dust. Tanks fire down narrow streets as defenders return fire from rooftops and alleyways. Days turn into weeks, and the battle refuses to end. Cargo ships trapped in the harbor remain anchored beside burning docks. Their crews watch helplessly as shells explode around them, the war unfolding just beyond the steel hulls of their vessels. Farther south, Iraqi units attempt to surround Abadan, yet the marshy ground slows their advance. Vehicles sink into mud while Iranian helicopters and jets strike the exposed columns. What was meant to be a lightning campaign begins to stall. By November, after brutal fighting, Iraqi troops finally capture much of Khorramshahr. The city lies in ruins. Its streets littered with debris and silent buildings scarred by gunfire, but the invasion has already begun to lose its momentum. Abadan still holds out. Iranian forces continue to resist across the front lines, and the expected uprising among local Arabs never arrives. The quick victory Saddam Hussein had imagined is slipping away. Instead of collapsing, Iran is beginning to rally. Across the country, the shock of invasion awakens a powerful determination to fight back. The war that was supposed to last weeks is only beginning. Across Iran, the invasion ignites a powerful surge of resistance. Cities that only months earlier had been divided by revolution now unite against a foreign enemy. Posters appear on walls, sermons echo through mosques, and the call to defend the nation spreads from village to village. Young men begin to gather at recruitment centers. Some are former soldiers returning to the army, while others are students, workers, and farmers who have never held a rifle before. They arrive with determination, driven by faith, patriotism, or simply the belief that their country must survive. Among them are thousands of volunteers known as the Basi. Many are barely adults. Some are still teenagers, carrying schoolbooks only weeks before stepping onto the battlefield. They receive brief training from the Revolutionary Guards before being sent toward the front lines. On their uniforms, many tie small pieces of white cloth, symbolizing the burial shroud that awaits every Muslim after death. Around their necks hang simple plastic keys distributed by religious leaders as a symbol of paradise promised to those who fall in battle. The war now becomes something larger than strategy or territory. It becomes a struggle filled with powerful emotion and belief. In early 1982, Iran prepares its largest counteroffensives yet. Vast formations of troops gather across the front, stretching through dusty camps and trenches carved into the earth. Before the attacks begin, clerics walk among the soldiers offering prayers and encouragement. Loudspeakers carry chants and religious songs across the camps as thousands prepare to advance. When the assault begins, waves of Iranian fighters move toward Iraqi defenses. Besieged volunteers often lead the advance, crossing open ground under heavy fire. Minefields explode beneath their feet, and machine gun fire tears through the ranks. Yet the attacks continue, clearing paths for better equipped Revolutionary Guard and army units behind them. The human cost is staggering. Still, the pressure begins to break Iraqi lines. Iranian forces push forward step by step, forcing their opponents to retreat toward the border they had crossed 2 years earlier. In the spring of 1982, the decisive struggle unfolds around Khorramshahr. The city that had fallen after weeks of brutal fighting now becomes the focus of a massive Iranian assault. Thousands of soldiers surround the ruined streets where Iraqi defenders wait behind sandbags and shattered walls. Artillery thunder echoes across the riverbanks as the battle begins. Inside bunkers beneath the destroyed buildings, Iraqi soldiers listen to explosions shaking the ground above them. Dust falls from cracked ceilings while the sound of gunfire grows closer with every hour. Outside, Iranian troops move carefully through the wreckage of the city. Burned vehicles and collapsed houses create a maze of shadows and broken concrete. After days of relentless fighting, Iraqi resistance begins to crumble. By May 1982, Khorramshahr returns to Iranian control. Thousands of Iraqi soldiers are captured while others retreat westward toward their own border. For Iran, the victory feels like a turning point. The invaders have been driven back, and the revolution has survived its first great test. Crowds gather in Iranian cities celebrating the liberation of the battered port. Flags wave above cheering streets while leaders declare that justice has been served. But the war is far from over. The front lines now rest once again along the border between the two nations. For many leaders in Tehran, pushing the enemy back is not enough. They believe Iraq must be punished for the invasion. Soon the conflict will enter a new and even more dangerous phase. By the summer of 1982, the battlefield has changed direction. Iraqi forces have been pushed back to their own frontier, and the once confident invasion has collapsed into retreat. Yet instead of ending the conflict, the moment opens the door to a new and dangerous decision. Inside the leadership of Iran, Fierce debates unfold. Some commanders argue that the war has already achieved its goal. The invaders have been expelled, and the country can rebuild after years of bloodshed. Others believe this struggle must continue. They argue that Iraq must be punished for the devastation it unleashed. If Saddam Hussein remains in power, they warn, another invasion could come at any time. Only by carrying the war into Iraq itself can Iran secure its future. In the end, the hardline voices prevail. In July 1982, Iranian forces cross the border into southern Iraq. Columns of troops move across flat desert ground toward the distant skyline of Busra, one of Iraq's most important cities and a gateway to its oil fields. But this time, the battlefield feels different. Iraqi soldiers are no longer advancing through foreign territory. They are defending their own land. Trenches spread across the desert while artillery batteries wait behind earthen barriers. Minefields and barbed wire stretch across the approaches to the city. When the Iranian attacks begin, the defenders are ready. Machine guns open fire as waves of troops advance across exposed grounds. Iraqi artillery pounds the battlefield while tanks maneuver behind the defensive lines. The fighting becomes brutal and exhausting, with neither side able to break through. Weeks pass, and the attacks fail to capture Basra city. The war settles into a grim stalemate that stretches across hundreds of miles. Soldiers dig deeper trenches into the dry soil, creating a scar across the land that resembles the battlefields of an earlier century. Artillery duels become part of daily life along the front. Shells arc through the sky before crashing into distant positions, sending columns of dust and fire into the air. Between the trenches lie minefields and shattered groundware. Previous assaults have already claimed thousands of lives. Despite repeated attempts, Iranian forces struggle to make meaningful progress. Their numbers remain large, but heavy weapons and air support are limited. Iraqi defenses grow stronger with each passing year. Saddam Hussein also adapts his strategy. Realizing that victory through invasion is no longer possible, he focuses on holding the line while strengthening his army. New units are trained and equipped, including the elite Republican Guard. Fresh weapons arrive from foreign suppliers, and the Iraqi military becomes larger and more organized than it had been at the beginning of the war. Meanwhile, both nations push their societies deeper into total mobilization. Posters, speeches, and propaganda fill newspapers and radio broadcasts. Families donate money and supplies while factories work long hours producing ammunition and equipment. Children grow up surrounded by stories of sacrifice and heroism, learning about the war before they are old enough to understand its cost. Years begin to pass with little change on the map. The front lines remain locked in place, while thousands continue to die in battles that shift the border only by a few miles at a time. What began as a swift invasion has now become a grinding conflict with no clear end in sight. And beyond the trenches, the war is about to spread into new and dangerous arenas. As the war on land grinds into stalemate, both sides begin searching for new ways to break the deadlock. The battle slowly spreads beyond the trenches and deserts, reaching cities, shipping lanes, and the fragile lifeline of the world's oil supply. In the waters of the Persian Gulf, long lines of oil tankers move across deep blue seas carrying fuel to distant continents. These ships are the arteries of the global economy, and soon they become targets in a dangerous new phase of the conflict. Iraq declares the Gulf a war zone. Fighter aircraft armed with anti-ship missiles sweep low over the water, searching for vessels connected to Iran's oil trade. When they strike, explosions tear through the hulls of massive tankers, sending towers of black smoke into the sky above burning seas. Iran answers with its own strategy. Naval patrol boats appear along the coastline, while missiles are placed on hidden launch sites overlooking the water. Merchant ships are stopped and searched, and sea mines begin to drift silently beneath the surface. Soon, neutral ships carrying oil for either side find themselves caught in the middle of a widening maritime war. Foreign governments grow increasingly alarmed. The Persian Gulf carries a large share of the world's oil, and any disruption could send shockwaves through the global economy. Warships from powerful nations begin to arrive. American vessels patrol the shipping lanes while Soviet ships escort tankers through the narrow waters. European navies deploy minesweepers to clear hidden explosives from the sea. The conflict that began as a regional war now draws the attention of the entire world. At the same time, another form of warfare emerges far from the front lines. Missiles begin falling on cities. Iraq launches ballistic rockets toward major Iranian population centers, including Tehran, Isfahan, and Shiraz city. The explosions shatter buildings and send families rushing toward shelters as sirens echo through crowded streets. Iran responds with its own strikes against Baghdad and other Iraqi cities. For civilians on both sides, the war suddenly arrives at their doorsteps. Night skies that once held only stars now glow with fire and smoke. Windows shatter, hospitals overflow with wounded civilians, and entire neighborhoods are reduced to rubble. The cycle of retaliation becomes known as the War of Cities. Amid this expanding conflict, an even darker weapon appears on the battlefield. Iraqi forces begin using chemical agents against Iranian troops in Kurdish communities along the northern front. Clouds of poisonous gas drift across villages and trenches, leaving behind silent streets and fields scattered with victims. Despite international condemnation, the attacks continue. The war now touches nearly every aspect of life for millions of people. On land, at sea, and in the skies above crowded cities, the conflict spreads wider with every passing year. Yet even as the battlefield grows larger, victory remains out of reach for both sides. By the late 1980s, exhaustion begins to grip the two nations' locked-in struggle. But the most tragic chapter of the war is still ahead. By 1988, the war has entered its 8th exhausting year. Across both nations, the signs of strain are impossible to ignore. Factories struggle to keep running, currencies lose value, and entire generations have grown up beneath the shadow of war. Along the front lines, hundreds of thousands of soldiers still face one another across trenches carved into the earth. The land between them is scarred by craters, shattered vehicles, and silent minefields that remain deadly long after the battles move on. Yet, despite the exhaustion, the fighting continues. In the north near the mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan, another tragedy unfolds. In March 1988, Iraqi aircraft appear above the town of Hal. Instead of conventional bombs, they release a deadly mixture of chemical agents. A strange smell drifts through the streets. Within minutes, panic spreads among the civilians below. People collapse where they stand, while others stumble through the town, searching for air that will not burn their lungs. Children lie beside their parents in silent courtyards. Animals fall where they graze. By the end of the attack, thousands of civilians are dead, victims of one of the most horrifying acts of the entire war. The battlefield itself is also changing. Over the years, Iraq has rebuilt and expanded its military with new equipment, better training, and a much larger army. Armored divisions supported by artillery and aircraft prepare for a final series of offensives. In the spring of 1988, Iraqi forces strike suddenly along several parts of the front. One of their main targets is the Alfa Peninsula, a narrow strip of land controlling Iraq's access to the sea. Iranian troops who once celebrated its capture now find themselves overwhelmed by a powerful counterattack. Artillery barrages shake the peninsula as Iraqi units advance through smoke and dust. Within days, the territory falls back into Iraqi hands. For Iran, the situation becomes increasingly desperate. Years of isolation have left its military short of aircraft, spare parts, and heavy weapons. The economy struggles under the pressure of war, while the population grows weary of endless sacrifice. At the same time, the danger of further chemical attacks looms over major Iranian cities. Many leaders begin to fear that Tehran itself could soon face devastation. Reluctantly, the government in Tehran begins to reconsider its position. For years, Iran had refused to accept a ceasefire without recognition that Iraq started the war. Now, the reality of continued fighting appears too costly to bear. In the summer of 1988, both sides finally agreed to the terms of a United Nations ceasefire. When the guns fall silent on August 20th, the battlefield that once thundered with artillery becomes strangely quiet. Soldiers remain in their trenches, listening to the unfamiliar sound of peace. The cost of the conflict is staggering. Hundreds of thousands have been killed. Millions more carry wounds, both visible and unseen. Cities lie damaged, economies shattered, and families across the region mourn those who never returned home. After 8 brutal years, neither nation has achieved the victory it once imagined. Iraq began the war hoping to seize land and power, yet it gained no lasting territory and emerged burdened by enormous debt. Iran endured immense losses but preserved its revolutionary government and strengthened its resolve against foreign pressure. The ceasefire ends the fighting, but it does not heal the wounds left behind. Across the deserts and rivers where armies once clashed, the memories of the war linger like smoke after a long fire. Survivors carry those memories for the rest of their lives, reminders of a conflict that consumed an entire generation. And even as the silence settles over the battlefield, the Middle East moves toward new storms that will soon rise on the horizon. The world is changing faster than ever, and every nation carries a story that shapes the global balance. At Polity Pictures, we bring those stories to life through cinematic journeys into power, politics, and history. If you seek depth instead of noise, perspective instead of propaganda, this channel is for you. Subscribe and join us as we continue exploring the forces that move the world. The next story begins now.